We heard Attorney General Lynch say just a few moments ago that the penalties were fitting. What determines a fitting penalty?
AML and sanctions violations have cost banks and financial institutions an astonishing $45 billion since the start of the 21st century. Let that sink in. $45 billion paid in penalties for breaking rules meant to stop dangerous criminals, terrorists, and rogue nations from accessing financial systems. While these fines have steadily increased, the year 2024 marked a jaw-dropping spike. Banks faced 8 major AML-related cases, leading to an eye-watering $3.3 billion in fines, a massive leap compared to just one major penalty of $186 million in all of 2023. But what caused this sudden surge? Pressure from international watchdogs like the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, has intensified. Regulators across the globe, not just in the U.S., are aggressively cracking down, raising fines higher than ever before. Sanctions enforcement, once dominated by America, is now spreading rapidly into Europe and beyond, with countries like the UK, EU nations, and Switzerland flexing newfound muscle. Yet despite these billions in fines, here's the harsh reality. Banks reported profits totaling $1.43 trillion in 2024 alone. JP Morgan by itself raked in a staggering $61.6 billion. So while fines might sound large, they're still merely a small fraction, just 0.13% of the industry's massive earnings. And the uncomfortable truth? These enormous fines haven't necessarily stopped repeat offenders. Major players have repeatedly broken the same rules, raising a crucial question. Are these fines a genuine deterrent, or simply the price big banks pay for business as usual? But to truly grasp how fines became so massive, we have to look back, because this trend didn't start overnight. Major fines for AML and sanctions violations weren't always the billion-dollar headline grabbers we see today. It started smaller but quickly escalated, changing the landscape of global banking forever. The turning point was Wachovia Bank in 2010, fined $110 million, a staggering amount at the time, for allowing drug cartels to launder money freely through their systems. But this was only the tip of the iceberg. In 2012, HSBC was slapped with an unprecedented $1.9 billion penalty. Regulators revealed the shocking truth. HSBC had systematically allowed Latin American drug cartels to move billions through the financial system, turning a blind eye to organized crime on a massive scale. These huge penalties signaled a new era. AML enforcement wasn't just routine compliance anymore. It became headline news, spotlighting how major global banks could inadvertently become partners in crime. Then, in 2024, came an even bigger shockwave. TD Bank USA dethroned HSBC with a fine so massive it set a new record. Again, drug trafficking cartels were central to the case, highlighting how deeply some banks had failed to learn from past mistakes. But banks weren't just getting penalized for cartel-related crimes. They were also caught enabling massive frauds and scandals that shook public trust. And some of the most shocking scandals of all involve famous banks, Ponzi schemes, and even high-profile billion-dollar thefts. Not all massive fines stemmed from organized crime or drug cartels. Some of the most shocking financial scandals came from inside the banks themselves. Take Goldman Sachs and the infamous MDB scandal, for example. This wasn't just careless oversight. Goldman Sachs actively facilitated one of the largest financial frauds in history, involving billions stolen from Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund. When the dust settled, Goldman Sachs faced staggering penalties that eclipsed previous fines and tarnished its reputation globally. Then there's JP Morgan, whose involvement with Bernie Madoff's notorious Ponzi scheme resulted in a jaw-dropping $2.6 billion fine. Investigators revealed that JP Morgan ignored clear warning signs, allowing Madoff to defraud thousands of victims out of their life savings. The scandal sent shockwaves through the banking world, highlighting how dangerously lax controls had become. Even lesser-known cases like TD Bank USA and First Bank of Delaware showed that banks were sometimes willing participants, enabling massive fraud schemes through negligence or indifference. TD Bank's repeated involvement in facilitating fraudulent activity eventually led to unprecedented penalties, showing a troubling pattern across the industry. These fines were enormous, but were they enough to change banking culture? With new players like cryptocurrency exchanges now also coming under scrutiny, the financial world faced an entirely new kind of threat, and these new financial frontiers brought their own shocking twists. Traditional banks weren't the only ones under the microscope. As cryptocurrencies exploded into the mainstream, regulators quickly realized these platforms presented entirely new ways for criminals to move money secretly, and enforcement followed swiftly. In 2022, the cryptocurrency exchange Bittrex faced a massive $24 million fine after regulators uncovered serious sanctions and AML violations. But this was just the start. Authorities also went after Tornado Cash, a crypto mixer notorious for laundering illicit funds, including millions stolen by North Korean hackers. This marked a major turning point, signaling regulators were no longer willing to let crypto operate unchecked. Yet the most explosive case came in 2023, when Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange, was hit with an astonishing fine of nearly $1 billion. Even more shocking was CEO Changpeng Zhao's dramatic downfall. Pleading guilty to serious AML and sanctions violations, Zhao landed in a U.S. prison, sending shockwaves throughout the crypto world. These massive penalties sent a clear warning. Crypto platforms, previously seen as the Wild West of finance, would face the same intense scrutiny as traditional banks, and regulators weren't stopping there. Sanctions enforcement quickly began targeting other sectors, dragging industries that never expected scrutiny into the harsh spotlight. But who else would be caught in this widening net? The answer would surprise everyone. It wasn't just banks and crypto exchanges feeling regulators' heat. Recently, enforcement expanded dramatically, targeting major corporations across industries previously untouched by sanctions penalties. In 2023, British American Tobacco faced a staggering fine of over $500 million. Their crime? Secretly supplying cigarettes to North Korea, blatantly violating international sanctions. The case exposed how even global giants could quietly sidestep critical laws for profit. That same year, tech powerhouse Seagate Technology paid $300 million for secretly selling high-end hard drives to China's blacklisted tech giant, Huawei. Regulators sent a clear message. Even the tech industry, known for innovation and fast growth, wasn't immune to massive penalties. Manufacturing giant 3M also got caught, fined nearly $10 million for supplying reflective license plate materials to Iran. In 2024, chemical companies like SCG Plastics and Iotech were fined millions for selling restricted materials and equipment to Iran, highlighting regulators' determination to clamp down across diverse sectors. This enforcement wave signaled a dramatic shift. Companies in tobacco, technology, manufacturing, and chemicals, industries once thought safe from sanctions scrutiny, were now facing severe financial penalties. Yet despite these billions paid in fines, a troubling question lingered. Did these huge penalties truly change corporate behavior, or had companies already factored fines into their costs of doing business? The uncomfortable answer would challenge everything we thought we knew about the effectiveness of these penalties. With billions in fines stacking up year after year, you'd expect banks and corporations to dramatically change their behavior. But the uncomfortable truth is, these fines might just be another line item expense, simply the cost of doing business. To put it in perspective, banks raked in a staggering $1.43 trillion in profits during 2024 alone. Even massive penalties, totaling billions, represent barely a fraction of their earnings, just 0.13%. For global banking giants like JP Morgan, HSBC, or Goldman Sachs, fines seem less like penalties and more like minor inconveniences. This reality becomes even clearer when considering repeat offenders. Institutions like HSBC and TD Bank USA have repeatedly paid multi-million-dollar fines for similar violations. Far from deterring future misconduct, massive penalties have become predictable expenses. Critics argue this signals a deeper issue: systemic flaws within banking culture and ineffective supervision. Regulators hand out heavy fines, yet violations continue, casting doubt on the fine's effectiveness as genuine deterrents. Still, enforcement bodies worldwide are doubling down, pushing for larger and more frequent fines. Organizations like the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, are urging tougher global standards, believing higher penalties will eventually force compliance. But what if fines themselves aren't the best solution? Could something else finally hold banks accountable? Something banks truly fear? The answer might lie in a threat far more devastating than any fine. While billion-dollar fines grab headlines, the real weapon regulators wield isn't money. It's the power to cut banks off entirely from the U.S. dollar clearing system. For banks worldwide, losing access to the dollar means losing their lifeline to global markets. Here's why that's devastating. Over 80% of international trade happens in U.S. dollars. Without dollar access, a bank can't effectively participate in global commerce, which can cripple its operations practically overnight. This risk terrifies banks more than any fine ever could. U.S. regulators have cleverly leveraged this fear to enforce sanctions compliance aggressively. They fine banks heavily, yes, but they always keep the threat of dollar exclusion as the ultimate consequence. This approach has worked remarkably well, forcing banks globally to fall in line with U.S. sanctions and AML requirements, often adopting standards even stricter than their home countries. This method hasn't only been successful, it's reshaped global financial compliance. Banks worldwide, desperate to maintain dollar access, have upgraded systems, tightened controls, and become vigilant against sanctioned activities. And it's not just American sanctions. Banks now closely adhere to EU, UK, and UN restrictions, largely driven by fear of U.S. exclusion. Yet, as effective as this strategy is, it's not without critics. Some argue the U.S. government's aggressive enforcement risks driving transactions underground or into less regulated spaces, such as cryptocurrencies or informal trade routes. Could there be a better, more balanced way to handle enforcement? Could regulators punish wrongdoers without inadvertently encouraging hidden criminal activities? The future of sanctions enforcement might look very different, and the solutions might not involve fines at all. If fines alone can't change the game, what can? Regulators worldwide are now exploring new, more effective ways to ensure banks and corporations genuinely follow the rules. One powerful alternative gaining traction is holding executives personally accountable. Imagine if instead of simply fining the bank, the people who allowed crimes or negligence faced real personal consequences: loss of bonuses, lifetime bans from the industry, or even criminal charges. Suddenly, compliance would become deeply personal, prompting leaders to proactively address issues rather than treating fines as a routine business expense. Another approach involves imposing business restrictions or tighter capital controls. Instead of levying fines that banks easily absorb, regulators could limit their ability to expand operations, cut back on risky activities, or demand stricter capital reserves. These measures directly impact banks' bottom lines, forcing them to actively prioritize compliance. Regulators outside the U.S. are also stepping up enforcement efforts. Countries like the UK, Germany, and Switzerland, alongside the EU, are preparing significant increases in sanctions enforcement, but they're likely to focus less on traditional banks, whose systems are already closely monitored, and more on emerging financial threats like cryptocurrencies, new financial products, and trade-related sanctions evasion. These new fronts represent a rapidly evolving battlefield. Regulators will likely deploy smarter technology, tighter international cooperation, and stronger individual accountability to win the war against financial crime. The result? Banks and companies may soon face far more than fines. They'll confront real business threats, operational constraints, and personal liability. But even with tougher regulations looming, a fundamental question remains unanswered. Can regulators truly outsmart financial criminals, or will this battle continue indefinitely? The answer might change how you view the entire financial industry. Almost $46 billion in fines have been levied since 2000 for AML and sanctions violations, yet banks continue to post record-breaking profits year after year. The truth is stark. Massive financial penalties alone have struggled to deter wrongdoing. From Wachovia's involvement with cartels to Goldman Sachs' billion-dollar fraud and Binance's shocking crypto scandal, the pattern repeats itself. Fines, while headline-grabbing, have become just another cost of doing business, barely a dent in the balance sheet for global financial giants. Yet a powerful shift may be coming. Regulators worldwide are embracing new strategies, targeting individuals, imposing stricter business restrictions, and using the ultimate threat: exclusion from the vital U.S. dollar market. As enforcement spreads beyond traditional banks to tech companies, crypto exchanges, and manufacturers, compliance is no longer optional, it's mandatory. But will these new methods finally transform the financial industry, or are we doomed to keep chasing criminals in an endless regulatory battle? Ultimately, the real question isn't whether banks will continue breaking the rules, but whether regulators can find smarter, more effective ways to stop them before they do. Because the price of failure isn't just billions of dollars, it's the integrity of the entire financial system.